Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leader Show. I'm your host, Adrian Evans. And on this show, we're all about exploring opportunities before we look at any of the constraints and risk. And I'm particularly excited today to welcome Ian McLernon on the show. Ian, hi, how you doing?
Hi, Adrian. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Now, Ian and I, a bit of background, we've known each other many years, over 2 decades. And I've always admired the way Ian has reinvented, pivoted his career. Probably difficult for me to find other people who've done that so much. And I'm fascinated today to learn more. I'm super curious about how he's done that and what he's done. So, without further ado, I wonder if you could just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Ian McLernon. The accent is Irish, but I've been lucky enough to have lived in, I think, three different continents now. So I've done the London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York, back to London. I'd say I'm a global citizen. I spend 80% of my time traveling, and I work for a company called Remy Cointreau, which is a French wine and spirit business. I've been here for 9 years.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to sort of put the big question out there first of all. I've observed that many people have a successful career and built that, but you've built several. I'm really curious. How do you think of yourself as somebody who reinvents themselves, or do you just keep stepping and moving forward?
I think there's an element of luck. But as somebody very famous, a golfer, I think, said, you make your own luck. The more you practice, the luckier you
Yeah,
get.
yeah. Gary
I,
Player. Yeah, yeah.
I firmly believe in that. There's always a reason why you end up in a role or you end up in a particular company. Look, I've always been fascinated by a number of things. One is I love brands. I think that branded businesses, I like working in an international context. I love working in different cultures with different people. Uh, and I love the fact that the world is quite an ambiguous place today. It might be the polite way of describing it, but I love the unpredictability of international business. You don't know what's around the corner. You have to
Yep.
learn to adapt. And I think your career is exactly the same. No longer is the career linear. It used to be in marketing, you come in as a
Yeah.
ABM, brand
Yeah.
manager,
Yeah.
SBM, director, marketing director, and then if you're really lucky, you might got the CEO job. But I think that type of ladder of career has gone. I firmly believe in moving sideways a lot. I think moving category is a good thing.
Yeah.
But the common theme of all of it is do a business, work in a business that you enjoy, and the one that you bounce out of bed every morning because some days it is tough. Sometimes you're jet lagged, sometimes you're tired. But I think at the core of it is that if you enjoy what you do,
Yeah.
you're going to put more in. Is there a plan? Yeah, I've always had a career plan. When you're younger, it's clearly very ambitious. You want to move every year, every 2 years. And then you realize actually moving around whenever you're early in your career might not be the right approach. It might be better just to really learn the basics. And I remember having a mentor who said to me, I guess these don't really exist anymore. It sounds like an encyclopedia. You'll read the first volume and then you'll get to the end of your career. But the reality is the world doesn't work like that. You don't just keep learning because the reality is what you learned last week could change, particularly in a digital environment. And I think, again, that's one of the things that I would always say to people is don't get so hung up on title. Don't get hung up on
Okay.
moving too quickly. I think it's important that you're learning. And more importantly, have a clear brand of who are you. And if you meet an employer or somebody comes to you and says, look, who's Adrian? Why Adrian? Why should I employ Adrian? Why would they be right for my business? Why would they be right for my business longer term? And the key question is longer term. I think when you're hiring people today, you're always looking for somebody not to do the job, but somebody can be in your business longer term. But what does longer term mean? There's no longer a 20-year cycle perhaps within one company, and that's perfectly okay. But comes back to with me, it's I do believe there's an element of luck, but the more you practice and more you try different things, and you know what your strengths are, and then you play on your strengths is really important. And of course, we all have weaknesses or development areas. And I think trying to tackle those is important, but nobody's perfect. You'll never be 100% perfect. It just doesn't exist.
Great, great. So, there's so much we're going to dive into here, but I want to try and stay on script if we can. So, when I first knew you, you were marketing director at Unwins, which was an independent off-license chain here in the UK. Now, if we froze that moment in time, Would you recognize the career you've built today as now, you're a CEO now. You work for the largest luxury brands business on the planet. Would you recognize that career you've built since?
To be honest, probably not. I think if you think about Unwins, which is a brand that has a similar level of heritage to some of the companies I've worked in. So it goes back, I think it was 1873, it was founded, family business. So there's some commonality of the businesses I've got, families, history, heritage. But Unwins was a turnaround. We were brought in by a very clear mandate to get it back to profitability, or at least market to a level that it could be sold. And it was sold, but the business was, to be very honest, in a sector that was declining. It was alcohol retail, corner shops. The real asset that I had was freehold properties. So, so back to the basics of you can leverage your properties, but then when the rents start creeping up and you have to pay interest, then you don't have a viable business. So I learned a lot from it, but it was probably, whilst I was called marketing director, I was effectively the GM in the end. People were leaving left, right, and centre. And my remit got broader and broader. Probably not the highlight of the job was always a phone call on a Friday or a Sunday night when a store had been ram raided or somebody had broken into a store. And I was the contact person that people were ringing up and saying, look, Ian, what do we do? So you learn very fast to pick up the operational side of the business as well as cash management. You had a business that was clearly not profitable, had cash flow issues, and you're running it day by day. So you learn a lot of the basics that, business school teaches you the theory. That was the reality. And it was a rude awakening for a 29-year-old me. So I always said it was my first GM job, and it taught me that actually I'm quite good at being able to think on my feet.
Yes.
You have to do it in a retail business, and clearly an environment that was a crisis. It wasn't a plain sailing moment. This was a business that could go under. And I always remember I got married on the Friday, and we sold the business on the Tuesday before, so 3 days beforehand. And it was one of those things. We could have sold it, or I could have been out of a job on my wedding day. And thankfully, we sold it.
It was binary.
Yeah, I don't think the timing was around my wedding, but certainly the wedding was booked a year in advance. But I think it taught me a lot in terms of the basics of business. And the final bit is it was about people. You have a retail business. It's the people who work in the shops. And that era, the shop manager quite often lived above the shop. It was part of their business or their perks. And it was a business that when it folded, it was really sad to see people lose their house, lose their livelihood. I was out of a job, but I knew I could probably bounce back quite quickly. But you knew there was other people who had spent most of their life or their career working for what was fundamentally a good company. But previous management teams hadn't spotted that it needed to adapt. So I learned a lot from it, but I remember at the very end, it was quite a humbling experience to see people, really, I didn't know what to do, but you learn the only thing you could do when somebody is losing their job is to be open and honest and try to show some empathy in terms of we've tried our best. And even today, I'm still in contact with a lot of people I've worked with because a really good team. And when you go through a crisis like that, you pull together. And we're all in the same boat. We all lost our jobs at the end of that experience.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I come from a retail background myself, and to me, retail is all about operations, but it's actually all about people. You're face to face with customers, and you're face to face, with your team and your staff. So, I think a theme for me that is undoubtedly is you strike me somebody who's very driven, whether that's outside of your career, whether that's sort of early water skiing, sort of rugby league honours at university, etc. But what ambition did you probably haven't said out loud yet? What ambition still burns inside you?
I think as you get more mature, I think you change your priorities, and it's not always single-minded. In my 20s, it was all about career. It was, I remember doing an executive MBA when those were not cool things to do. I was 22, I think, when I started it. I used to have to lock myself away at the weekends, and that's what you did because you were so focused on your career. And it really did help me because it gave me level of knowledge or theory of knowledge that I did need, and has helped me ever since. But would I do that today? No, I think that things like family, getting the balance right, is very important for me. I travel pretty much Monday to Friday, and I have a very strict rule, which is when you're doing that most weeks, what you don't do is travel at weekends. What you try not to do is also have company events or events at the weekend. So very rarely will I actively work at the weekends, and that's a choice that you have to make. But when you travel, you don't work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday when you're away. It's long, but again, the benefit is you get to go to cool places, you meet interesting people, and I say it's a job that you love doing. But you have to have boundaries, and I think you have to set your own rules.
Yeah.
If you're younger, you don't set the rules. You assume that you have to work 100 hours, you have to do this, you have to be seen as being the longest in the office. Today, I wouldn't do that. But that's experience and confidence now tells me that I don't need to do that. In my diary, and I have an open diary with the vast majority of all of my direct reports plus the level below. They can see where I am. And I work on the basis that's just useful with time zones. But also, if I'm picking my kids up from school on a Friday afternoon, it's in my diary. It's perfectly okay. If I want to go to the gym because I've been away and I need some exercise, I put it in my diary. And I think it's good that people are transparent.
Yeah.
We don't work 9 to 5, certainly not in an international business. This morning I started with conversations with Asia, and I have a call with the US later tonight as well. So it's not fixed art, but you have to do, and you have to be flexible. So the younger self wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have had the confidence to say, no, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to try and get the balance right. Today, I'm a real believer in you have to get the balance right. And I think family, having 2 kids, you're now one's a teenager and one's nearly a teenager, that puts things in perspective as well, because it's not just about you, it's about a family.
Excellent. Yeah, it's fascinating that one to see what we did in our 20s and just the drive and the ambition. I did an MBA myself very early in my early 20s as well. But as you say, it was great grounding. But at the same time, now we've got different choices to make and different boundaries to play with. But when you were growing and you had a rapid path there from functionally as a marketing director, but ultimately a GM, and then you went on to run other businesses, I say particularly at Moët Hennessy, etc. Is what did you have to let go of so you could move forward?
I think you learn that you can't be the expert on everything. Early in your career, you're doing functional roles, whether it's a brand manager on a particular brand. You're the expert of that brand. You're in charge of it. You're the one that if somebody asks the question, you need to know the answer. When you move into more general roles, you cannot know everything about everything. So you have to surround yourself with good people who are experts. And the biggest leap for me was coming out of the drinks sector and moving into cosmetics. So whenever I moved across to Dior, I always remember the phone call from the headhunter saying, we have a role at LVMH. And I go, oh, right, okay, Moët Hennessy. And they said, no, Parfum Christian Dior, which is perfume and cosmetics. And I go, firstly, really interesting, but I know nothing about the category. So I said, could you send me the role spec? And it was a commercial director job. And I read it. It's really interesting. But again, I know nothing about the category other than I know the brand. I know it's a fashion brand. I know LVMH, but I know it more mainly from the drink side. So what I did that afternoon was walk down Oxford Street. And in that era, you had lots of department stores. So Selfridge is still there, John Lewis, House of Fraser, which is no longer there, Debenhams, etc. And what I had this really bad experience of perfume and cosmetics retail. It's scary, it's intimidating. I didn't know anything about the category. I'm walking in and go, whoa, people are pouncing on me, trying to sell something to me that I don't really know anything about. And I'm out of my comfort zone. So after a couple of hours, I'm going, this is really interesting. It's clearly a retail business. Second thing is it's about the people who sell the product, and it's experiential. And the final bit was what I remember saying to the team in Paris at Dior during the interview process. Look, the experience to me is intimidating, it's inconsistent, and it doesn't feel very luxurious. To me, it was as mass market you get, because the model was try to sell something, offer you a gift with purchase, or talk about the price, not talk about the brand or how the product could be used or how to enjoy the product. And I guess that's where I was the odd one out, because I wasn't the product expert. And
yeah,
a little bit of a bet hiring somebody who knew nothing about the category.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I knew how to manage people. I knew how to manage multi-site retailing, given the retail experience. So I have a real love of brands, and I was really excited about the job because I'm going, this is the one that will really push me
Mm,
to go out of my comfort zone. But again,
mm,
back to your original question, I had to make sure the people built around me were product experts. So I learned very quickly on fragrances, not dissimilar to wines and spirits. Skincare
okay.
is quite scientific, so skincare is relatively easy to get to understand. Its features and benefits. Makeup is fashion. It's a totally different world. And I was there for 8 years, and I really love the perfume and cosmetics sector. I still, every time I go through an airport or a department store globally, I will go straight to perfume and cosmetics. You can learn a lot from that sector. It's fast, high level of innovation. 35% of what you sell is novelties or newness.
Okay.
And it's about the people on the
Mm,
counter that sell the product. They can make a difference of plus or minus 30% on your sales line. Um,
absolutely.
and I try to apply what I learned there in my business today in terms of experience, storytelling. Um,
Yes.
but it all comes back to you don't need to be a product expert. You have to have people around you who are product
Mm,
experts. So that for me is the biggest learning is that every job I've gone into, I don't need to be seen as the expert. Uh,
okay.
you need to know enough. You need to have people around you to advise you. Look, if you have to be passionate about the category you work in. If somebody asked me to work in a space that I wasn't interested in, I wouldn't do it because,
Yeah, yeah.
again, you need to be passionate for bouncing out of bed every morning and doing what you need to do.
So I'm hearing there that the curiosity really does make a difference.
Yeah,
Also, brand experience. Just a short example from me. I remember once being in Paris on the Champs Elysees buying some perfume for my mother-in-law. Yep. I won't name the brand. Um, but the I've never had a retail experience like it was incredible. Okay. Literally got moved around the shop from selection
yeah.
to packaging all the way around. We had 5 touch points during that time. Okay. And I walked out with my now wife and I was like, I think that's the best customer experience I think I've ever had in my life. So
Yeah.
much so, we obviously, when we gave the gift, we had to tell the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the story then just, it's like, oh, so then they went to Paris and then they had the same, as did their friends. And that experience, it was a luxury, it was a truly luxury product and service experience.
Yeah. And for me, that's what luxury is. Luxury is the experience and the fact that you have a memory of buying the product, even though it could be many years ago. And the second thing is you tell people about it. So you can use the classical way to build brands, which is a high level of media investment. You build awareness and desirability, but that desirability can be wiped out by a bad experience at the point of sale. So I think that brands today have to start with the customer experience as well
Yeah,
as building awareness in the same time. I think digital has made it very fast, but I still believe retail, whether it's physical or online, can make a big difference. And I'm still a believer on physical retail. Certainly in the wine and spirit sector, the best brand ambassador I have is a bartender, a sommelier, or a member of staff in a shop that's able to recommend our products and be able to explain a little bit about the product.
yes.
What's the difference between that and that? Okay, it's a brand, two brands, but there is a story behind it. Generally, I
Absolutely.
would say pick the bottle up and you read the back, it tells you enough information. So it's not difficult, but we want people to be able to tell the story because if you're selling products that are above an average price point. It depends how you define luxury. Luxury to some people might be $10. To other people, it's $10,000. But what you want is to feel special when you buy the product, and you want to know a little bit about the history, the savoir-faire of the brand. You want to know how to use it, how to enjoy it, and you want to be able to have something that you can impart to your friends or family about that product or that brand, about why you've bought it. Um,
Absolutely.
so to me, that's the essence of what brands are. But in luxury, it's very much about the experience because you can build it or you can kill it very quickly as well.
Wonderful. Well, moving on with that theme, what separates a good operator from somebody who absolutely thrives in brands at LVMH, which is phenomenal, I suppose, scale global success?
For me, LVMH, I spent a decade of my career there working at
Yes.
Parfum Christian Dior, and then Moet Hennessy as well. I think in terms of luxury, LVMH is clearly the leader in terms of size,
Yeah.
also in terms of ways of working. It's a mega matrix where the brands actually compete against each other in many of the spaces. So within perfume and cosmetics, consumer doesn't know that Dior, Givenchy, Benefit are from the same parent.
Yeah.
They compete against each other. So I think there's a personality in each of the brands. I think in terms of building a portfolio of brands, LVMH to me is the real reference point. L'Oreal is the same, I think, in that space. But they're big. What I also learned was that you can be very entrepreneurial in a big company because of the way it's organized. So if you don't have too much hierarchy, you can get things done very quickly. And certainly, I love those types of environments where you can make decisions quickly. Coming back to your point about an operator, to me, operators and leaders can be the same thing, but I think you have to balance long-term direction and short-term decision making. What we've seen in the recent few years, whether it's the pandemic, whether it is what's happening in the Middle East conflict today, you have to make decisions quickly, both strategic and operational in the same sentence. And again, that's to me the when I meet people who can do both, they always impress me. Am I perfect at that? No, but I love the pendulum of playing with both at the same time in the same conversation.
Fascinating. So what I'm hearing from you, and again, you mentioned today's global business world as ambiguous, and I think we definitely call it uncertain.
Yeah.
How have you, because I think that's something how have you thrived on that? And have you consciously reinvented yourself as you've gone through your career? Because you've moved categories, as you said, the category move that you previously had was quite significant. I was a headhunter at that time, and I'd be thinking, hey, this would be quite some brief to. And again, I made my name by doing that, by saying, actually, this is just a different category. That's learnable. It's the skills and the leadership that we actually want to impact the business. But has it been conscious for you to reinvent yourself? I know you've seen experience and you met opportunity, but have you consciously reinvented yourself?
Whether it's reinvention or adapt, I've always tried to have flexibility in everything I do. So COVID is a good example. I was running our US business at Remy Cultural. We were hit first before Europe. And the first thing I remember was the day before St. Patrick's Day, we got a memo from the New York State saying you need to close your office. We have a pandemic. Okay. And there's no playbook. You don't have a crisis management manual that tells you how to deal with a pandemic. But remember, it was only really in New York at that stage it was an issue. I remember talking to people in California or Miami who saying there's no issue here, or certainly there wasn't in Europe at the time either. So you have to communicate clearly, and that's the key, I think, in a lot of challenging situations or ambiguous is clear communication of what we're doing, why, and the why should be about safety of your team. Just a basic, whose Maslow hierarchy of needs, safety is the most important thing. But I do think over communication is an important thing. And I learned during the pandemic about over communicating. Sometimes it can be short and sharp. Doing weekly town halls can be 15 minutes, can be an hour. Allow people to ask questions because people don't know. People don't know the answers. They want the answers. And sometimes learn to be humble. Because I remember I was asked many, many times a question. I go, I don't know. And it's okay to say you don't know. Yeah. But what you can't do is say, I don't care. If you say, I don't know, but I will find out or I will come back, I think it's the right answer. And for me, that's always been when I genuinely don't know. I try not to waffle around it. I just say, I don't know. I'm going to have to come back to you. So you have to be quite assertive in terms of your answer. Otherwise, people see that as a weakness or lack of empathy or care, particularly in a pandemic. And there's a number of other examples in the US where we had lots of the racial tensions, the murder of George Floyd. I did not really understand the details, so you had to learn the detail. But what I did was we formed a diversity council of 24 people volunteered to help me and help our management understand why there was racial tensions, but more importantly, what could we do for our employees to try to dissipate the issues or at least talk about the issues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But as an expatriate from Ireland, okay, I don't understand the real
Yeah.
depth of the issue. And you can read up on it, but you're never going to be the subject matter expert. So surrounding yourself with good people who are able to advise you on these
Mm.
sensitive topics is good. And it also gives you consensus because you have 24 people who are saying, well, that we're working together with the management team on this and we support them. And maybe we don't know the answers, but we're going to try and work it out, and we're going to
Yeah.
try to have a plan that protects everybody in the company.
Yes, it's a real balance there but I'm hearing that on the one hand, as a leader, you assume responsibility and you provide direction. Yep, you demonstrate empathy, and saying that you don't know is forgivable. Saying you don't care is unforgivable. But actually, you're going to have an action plan, and we are going to find a way forward, and we're going to do something. Can actually, I'm hearing, could probably actually enhance your leadership ability.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's good to show a little bit of your own vulnerability. I'm a real believer the whole way through my career of 360 feedback. You don't get enough of it. It's
Yep. Yep.
feedback. Somebody said feedback's a gift. It's amazing when you get it, but you don't get it very often. So sometimes the formal 360s can be amazing. And I remember working with an executive coach, and he said to me, "You're brave to make yourself so vulnerable." And I said, "Look, it's the only way I can get feedback sometimes. People to be really blunt and honest with me."
Yeah, yeah, of
I
course.
remember the scenario, which is I sat in a chair and had all of my leadership team sitting around me, and I said, tell me what I'm like." "Oh, you're okay, Ian." And I go, no, tell me what you really think. Half an hour later, you get the real blunt truth of
Absolutely.
the things where I was frustrating people. It was balanced with the good things as well. But,
Of course.
what I wanted to know is the things that frustrate, to be able to tackle them or at least be
Just
aware of the
absolutely.
feedback. So I really do like people to be giving feedback, and I would try to do the same. But what I realize is that some people are receptive and others are less receptive, and you have to find the right time and the place to give feedback. Look, annual appraisals I'm not a big fan of, because I think if you're giving feedback once a year, it's a real problem. It should be continual. And when you're saying something to somebody in an appraisal which is shocking or they're surprised about, it shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't happen like that. So the whole way through my career, I've always worked well with managers or line managers who give you this blunt, direct feedback because it works for me. But I know it doesn't work for other people. So you have to be able to adapt your style and understand the person that you're giving the feedback to. Are they willing to receive? What format do they want to receive it in? Again, this is one of the things I love about international businesses: different cultures, different contexts. There's a book called The Culture Map by, I think it's Erin Mayer, who's an INSEAD professor. That book I have read, I reckon, 10 times. Every time I've moved, it comes out the cupboard, just to make sure you don't make the same mistakes that you might have made in the past in terms of cultures. Your leadership style and your managerial style has to adapt based on where you're based.
Yeah.
I came back from being in Asia and the US after 12 years. Coming back to London was not an easy move because my style sometimes is not Anglo-Saxon. I've become this hybrid of other things. Everybody assumes that America, the US, and UK is very similar in style. It's not. Very, very different. So again, that's one of the things I love about the job, is being able to pivot with different cultures. But you need feedback, and you also need somebody to point out the obvious, which is when you perhaps don't do it the right way, or you're culturally insensitive, you need somebody to give you the feedback so you don't make the mistake twice.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm smiling here, Ian, because it's one of my first recommendations, that book from Erin, that I've made to anybody doing international business. And it's amazing. I've used it this way. I literally used it yesterday to explain to somebody doing work in America or working with American executives. This particular executive was very, very context heavy. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that's going to frustrate the organization. It's almost the least context heavy culture you could possibly do business with. Therefore, your communication would adapt. But what was fantastic was being able to adapt, being to evolve. And I think that's actually the skill. I almost view all communication as almost like having more keys of the piano to play than
Yeah.
then knowing which key to play. And I'd imagine, given your experience across all major markets, that. But no, I'm glad we're on the same page there with that one. So talking about that, what do you see now as a CEO that you couldn't see earlier in your career? Now you have that responsibility and that breadth as well.
I think it's responsibility for whether it's stakeholders, shareholders, but also your employees. I think
Yeah.
you have to do the right thing. Um, it's not about self-gain. It's not about you. It's not about your career. It's about people who work with you, or your teams. There's much more responsibility for the wider stakeholder group, and it's maturity, but also you're having more people in your team, so you have more responsibility. Some people like that, others don't. And I've worked, as you know, I came through the classical marketing
Yeah,
hierarchy
yeah.
or ladder. You can have lots of people who get to marketing director, but do not want to go into general management because they don't want the additional responsibility. They want to be able to work with small teams on brands, and that's fine. Um, I like having more responsibility. I like having the global remit of teams based around the world, but it comes with responsibility. You have to be responsible for your teams, and also be accountable for the performance of your teams as well. You can't blame it on your team. It's your responsibility. You're the person who's in charge. But it's not all your actions that will deliver the results. The hard work is done by the teams, and I firmly believe in the people on the front line, our sales reps, our brand ambassadors. They're the ones who really make a difference. So you have to work out what are the key contributors, the key roles in your team. And I think sometimes organizations, particularly in the luxury sphere or in the brand goods, we're putting too much emphasis on brand managers rather than necessarily the good old-fashioned salespeople. Salespeople sell brands. They build connections with the trade. They give visibility to the brands at the point of purchase. And in some cases now we're selling direct to consumer, DTC. So I think we're starting to see a shift back to sales being a great place to start your career, but actually can be a very good career as well. And as you know, I started in sales before I went into marketing, and
Yeah,
I always said I wasn't the best sales rep, but I really loved it because I learned so much.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I do think that sometimes you have to remember where you've come from. Your
yeah,
first,
indeed, indeed.
I always remember selling beer in the East End of London. And that era, you were doing cash collection. You were like a credit controller. You had money in the boot of your car, as well as a keg of beer that you were delivering to a customer. And you learn the basics of customer service. And I still think today that stands
Yeah,
me
great.
head where
Agree.
I can think back and I can remember some of the rejections I got from customers where I said, "You owe me money," and they were pretty much throwing you out the door. You have to find a way of doing it to be able to get that customer to pay their bills or to be able to get that customer
Indeed.
to list your product. And I think that going back to the basics of how does your business work? Salespeople quite often are the ones who are underrated. And I firmly believe in our business that the salespeople need to be valorized more. They need to be seen as more valuable. And I don't think it's always people in marketing that are running the business. Some businesses go too far on marketing and they forget about the salespeople. It's a balance, and I think that sales and marketing are very complementary. They have the same goal in the end, but they have to respect each other in terms of the technical differences of what they do.
Now, I'm smiling here because obviously I've got a strong sales career myself, and I actually think that serves me and every single day. Yep. And yeah, obviously the parallel from yourself here as well. I also think actually everybody in business should spend time in sales because no business exists without top line revenue is the fact.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. Today, actually for the last 4 years, I don't physically have an office. I don't even have a desk. I have a Toomey backpack, which is well traveled over the last, I think it's 15 years old.
Okay.
It's got patina, as somebody said. In other words, lots of scruff marks on it because
Yeah, yeah.
that's my
It's
office.
worn. It's worn.
To me, when you have teams that are based in markets or based remotely, to me, I go to my team, not the other way around. And again, it's a different style, which I think is more normal today to do that. In the
Yeah,
past, it's always very much your team come to you.
indeed.
You have a corner office or whatever the office looks like, and office equals status in some cultures.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I found out in the US that the corner office is the big thing. I personally disliked it. I struggled with being isolated in the corner office, but today, I enjoy going out to the markets, meeting the teams in the markets, meeting the distributors, meeting the salespeople, talking to the brand teams in terms of how we grow our business. So it's a reverse of how business perhaps
Mm,
worked in the past, and I think it's a better way to do it because I'm more in touch with what's happening in the markets, and I can see,
yeah,
smell, hear, use my senses to see how my brands are
yeah.
performing, and also get real feedback from customers. We had a customer event last week and I asked them for feedback on my team and our performance, and it was, yeah, everything's okay. 5 minutes later, they start really telling you what they think. And again, you wouldn't get that in a meeting, but
No.
over a lunch or in a social environment,
Yeah.
people loosen up and they start to be a bit more honest. And it's really good feedback that you can then use to be able to improve your business. And that's the sole reason why you want feedback is to improve either
Of course.
yourself or your business performance.
Absolutely. So actually looking at, what's actually happening then almost beneath the surface in luxury drinks that most people are missing at the moment. What's actually happening then?
I, I, I I firmly believe in. We talked about storytelling earlier. I think you have
Yep.
to go further story living. You have to bring the brands to life. Um, I think that brands come from a place. I think
Yep.
the and in France people talk about terroir. Terroir matters. The sense of place can alter or have an impact on the taste of the products, but
Yeah,
also
indeed.
perception of the products. And I really think that we have to go back to the basics of explaining where the products come from, why they're great.
Yep.
People talk about sustainability in the spirits business, and I'm the head of Spirits Europe as one of my other roles that I do. It's an honorary position where we represent spirits at European level. One of the biggest challenges we have is explaining to regulators, governments, how are spirits made? Where do they come from? And in most cases, they come from a single site distillery. You have lots of family ownership within the
Yep.
sector. It's effectively a product that comes from the land, or it does come from the land.
Indeed.
Creates jobs at a local level, whether it's farmers, whether it's the grape growers, whether it's the grape pickers, whether it's glass manufacturers at a local level, whether it's people in
Mm,
the bottling lines, etc. So you have a whole ecosystem, which is actually quite
indeed.
sustainable. And it's what you give back to the local community that's really important. Um,
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
we have one of our brands. It's called Bruichladdich whiskies from Islay in Scotland,
Yeah,
and we're the second largest employer on the island. I think the
yeah,
largest
yeah.
employer is the local council. So you have a responsibility to the communities. So when your business is doing well, you need to make sure you're giving back to the communities. When the business is challenged, you need to make sure you're consistent as well. So we're
Yeah,
not just
indeed.
products in a factory. I would never
Mm,
use the word factory in our sector.
yeah.
They're coming from a distillery. They're coming from a place, and that terroir does matter. And I think we have to tell that story. But the best way is to either take people to the place
Yep.
to get to life, or use technology to show them visuals and try to
Brilliant.
arouse people's sense about how
Yeah.
this product is made, how to enjoy it. Because quite often with spirits, the challenge that consumers have is knowing what to do with it. How
Of
do
course. Yeah.
how do you make a margarita cocktail? What's the ingredients? If you go to a bartender, he'd make it for you, an amazing one, I'm sure. But how do you make it at home? So a lot of what we're trying to do is educate,
Yeah.
as well as sell the brand. The reality is in cocktails, you're not just selling one brand. It can be three products you're having to sell together. Those three products don't necessarily come from the same brand owner. Um, so we have to work together at a category level, and we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to really think about the consumer. What do they want, and how can we help educate them and also excite them about what they're about to buy?
Mm.
And the reason why you buy it is because you want to enjoy it. It's about the experience. Back to what I discussed earlier about cosmetics.
Now you're bringing up all sorts of images about coming from the land. I can only give just I was recently at a wine tasting event, and the actual grower and owner was there giving the story. And again, up until that point, it was just another bottle of wine for me. But then he said, "Well, this This is what the harvest was like that year. This is what the family were doing, etc. And you're like, oh my word. And then, by the way, the wind changed over this period of time. You're like, oh my word, this guy's a farmer. This guy isn't. But the other one that stuck with me forever, I always wanted to go to the Sky. There was a distillery there I wanted to see. And I had this amazing image in my head. But of course, I go to Sky, it's pouring with rain. You can hardly even see the distillery. It's cloudy, it's whatever. But that will stay with me forever because, and then the story stayed with me about the spirit being clear. I was really surprised when I see the spirit clear for the first time. I was like, why isn't that? The one I taste is dark brown or whatever. And that was explained to me. So, but that stayed with me 25 years later.
Yeah.
But I
I,
love what you said there about story living, because I think as well, there's something inherently wrong with storytelling. People want engagement and they need to be part of that story. So to bring that story to life for them.
Yeah, I think you can't broadcast anymore. People have choices and they have short attention spans. Social media scrolling, doom scrolling means that you have 2 seconds to capture somebody's attention, and we have sometimes 200 years, 300 years of history to try to tell somebody, but you have to make it relevant, but you have to engage quickly for them
Yeah.
to want to know more about it. We'd love to take everybody to the distilleries, back to your experience, because you'll remember it for a lifetime. But it's a tricky one. But the key thing is always about how do you enjoy the product. If you can say to somebody how you use this product and it's going to create pleasure, enjoyment, memories, or owns an occasion. I always admire categories like champagne. Champagne is for weddings, it's for celebrations. Most first class airlines, and I don't travel first class, but first class airlines will serve champagne. It's part of the ritual, and it's an expectation that comes in those occasions. And I think that's the opportunity for brands is to try to own an occasion, make it relevant.
Indeed.
Explain why you're different. And quite often the terroir or where you come from is, for me, the real point of difference that we need to tell.
I love that. Own an occasion. Own an occasion. So what's obvious? What will be obvious in 5 years' time in the luxury space that isn't today?
I think there'll probably be less brands. I think that during the boom era, what you see is lots of brands becoming luxury when they're not necessarily luxury. High price doesn't mean luxury. I think that luxury is craftsmanship, it's heritage. Intrinsically, the product has to be better quality, having a point of difference, and also strong desirability. So some brands that have become luxury just because they've taken their prices up, I don't think is sustainable. Look, the car industry is a good example of what Chinese car makers have done or achieved over the last 5 years is phenomenal. They had products that were probably superior, but they now have brands. And BYD, I was just reading the weekend, are now wanting to come into Formula One. So the world is moving very fast, and the consumer chooses what they see as acceptable brands, desirable brands, or luxury brands. And I think that the word luxury is probably overused as well. I think that you will have strong brands and you'll have weak brands. So I always think that strong brands is where you want to be, but generally luxury brands in the past have been seen as strong brands because they have high levels of desirability, they have a clear uniqueness, and they have better quality and craftsmanship. The brands to me that stand out always are Hermes. It's consistent. If you think about Louis Vuitton, is the same. Within our own portfolio, we have numerous brands, but I don't want to plug brands like Louis XIII, which you can see over my shoulder. These are brands that are centuries old. And again, you believe the quality of the liquid is superior. The quality of the experience is differentiated. And we believe that these are products that consumers are willing to buy, to enjoy, or to collect as well in some cases. So I think the world is changing, but I still think that strong brands will be important for consumers in terms of where you go to, because you want to enjoy, you want to experience moments. And the reason why people buy brands is about pleasure. It's about enjoyment. And that's great working in the wine and spirit sector, because that's what I believe we do. We're not providing functional products. We're providing products that create memories, or you remember your first glass of Louis XIII. You remember your first glass of a certain cocktail. If it made in the perfect way or in a great experience with good friends, you're going to remember it's memories.
Yeah. No, sorry, you're bringing back some. Just even thinking about that. So, in terms of what belief has guided, I use the term reinvention, but perhaps adaptability across your career. What's the one belief more than anything else that's really enabled that to happen?
It's okay to fail. I remember very early on being told, when something's successful, everybody will claim to have created it. When it fails, it'll be your problem.
I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, I think it's very true. And I worked on a brand called Hooper's Hooch very early in my career. It was one of my first brand management roles, and it was a phenomenal success. And then various reasons it started to decline. The brand team weren't responsible for its decline. It was a number of factors. But the point is, my mentor at the time said, "Look, it's not your fault. It's not the brand team's fault. It's everybody claims to have created it. But the reality is that sometimes people are lucky. They're at the right place at the right time. But it comes back to the more you practice things, the more you try things, the more you learn from mistakes of the past, the luckier you will get. And I do think it's okay to fail, as long as you learn from it and you move on quickly. I think the worst thing to do is when something fails is spend too long on the post-mortem. You need to understand the diagnostic of why it didn't work, and what we could do differently, but move forward at pace. Because otherwise you hung up on the negatives rather than the positives. Because even when something fails, I can assure you 40% of it probably was positive, but the other 60% was the important part which failed. So there's always positives in everything, and it's always a learning experience. Some of it's the context, some of it will be the timing, some of it will be the product wasn't the right product. Okay, so you can learn from it and you move forward. But the key thing is to move forward at pace. Which to me I love. I like moving fast. I also like to understand what really happened, so you don't make the same mistake twice.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. I can see how you'd operate like that, knowing your character. What if somebody wanted to transform their career today? What is non-negotiable for them to allow effective pivots, possibly even a change of category? But a lot of our audience are, our marketplace is one that is right at the forefront. Suddenly, payments has become very much an industry that is headline, and there's lots of opportunities in various places. There's a lot of big bets going on, and some of them are going to come off, and some of them aren't. But what advice would you be saying to people? Right, this is non-negotiable about you.
I think people have to be humble. I think arrogance is not something in most businesses that works. I think you have to be inquisitive. You have to genuinely want to know more about that product, that company, that category. So you don't need to be product experts. I think people can switch categories quite easy, but you need to be interested and you need to be inquisitive. And you need to ask lots of questions. I always admire people reaching out. LinkedIn is great, but as you know, you can get your inbox can be full of random emails. But people who reach out with a nice, polite introduction saying, "I'd love to chat to you about your career. I'm interested in moving from category X to wines and spirits. Could you spare 15 minutes?"
Yeah, amazing.
And if it's done the right way, I'm 90% of the time I will probably
agree with you.
Let's find a time, because I think you have to give back. I've been lucky because I've had some really good mentors and line managers who've given me that feedback I needed. But you also get your lucky breaks from just advice that people give. And I think, to me, it's really important to give back to people. We know in today's economic conditions, it's pretty tough. There's a lot of people looking for jobs, even within our sector. And if somebody asks me for help, again, my view is, if it's asked in the nice way, I will always try to help. Because you never, we're human beings, and we all should treat each other with respect. And the world is a small place. You and I haven't spoke for many years. I do remember our first exchange when you were a headhunter. So, that's 25 years ago. But human beings remember people for good, positive reasons. And I think we should give back to each other and try and help each other as well.
100%. 100%. Yeah, that we're totally aligned with that. My mission whilst I'm alive is to positively impact 20,000 careers. And that gives me a reason to get out of bed every single day. It also gives me a reason to go to sleep at night when I've done that. So we're totally aligned on that. And the world is a very small place.
Yeah.
So just trying to pull things together then. And as I said, there's been many fascinating, I'm dreading having to put all these together in a summary at the moment because there's been so many points. But what are you still trying to figure out in your career?
Long list. I think going back to the encyclopedia, I think the world is changing so fast that you have to learn to adapt. I think that the whole digital ecosystem, AI, I think can be a real enabler. It's not. I don't think it's a game changer. I think it's an enabler of doing business to be more efficient. I think that what's happening in terms of macroeconomic tariffs, etc., you can't control. But I think you have to learn to adapt. And I love the volatility of that, but you have to be able to navigate it. So, the American Army created the terminology VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, chaos, ambiguity. I love that. But that was from the Cold War. It was the 1980s they created it, but it's so relevant for today.
Absolutely.
And I still think will be relevant for the rest of my career.
Yes.
To skill the future. It's the skill I look for in people, being able to live in that type of environment. Not everybody's comfortable with it, but I think to me, it's a prerequisite of success, is being able to adapt to that world. If you can love ambiguity, I think you do well in today's world. And it's one of the things that I like to think I do love ambiguity. And it's what drives me quite often, because you have to learn, you have to adapt, you have to over communicate, you have to get feedback, all of the things we've talked about during this meeting. And so I'm very optimistic for the future. The day I don't enjoy what I do, then I probably won't do it. But I do. Yeah. I love what I do, and I love the world we're in today. So.
Well, Ian, thank you very much indeed for navigating us around your career, some of the decisions you made, some of the opportunities and situations that you found yourself in. I wonder if I could just pull out some of the most salient that I think could be most relevant for our audience. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Well, first of all, there were numerous, and I've got about 4 or 5 pages of notes, so I'm just going to try and focus on the most salient. I think the first thing that hit me straight away was just the embracing and acceptance of a uncertain and ambiguous world, and a response from you. There's multiple choices you could take to that world, but your response, I think, for me, is a numberfold, which is, one, to be curious, to leave with curiosity. Secondly, to ask questions. And then also, I think, to be adaptive. And I think those things, there's almost a holy trinity there of an approach and a mindset to try and embrace and take things forward. I think one of the things I've always admired about your career is, yes, the common element is brands, and they're consumer brands, but actually being brave enough and also influential enough to move different categories. But also, that's typical of your approach. And I used to love that when I was working in London as well, which is any product we wanted to go and see, no problem. Oxford Street isn't very far away, Regent Street isn't, and Bond Street isn't. We're going to go and do the customer experience. But you brought that to life. And you said, I don't know anything about this. I'm not normally a consumer of this, but I'm just going to experience this myself. And I'm going to almost use my outside advantage here, or my outsiderness, as an advantage. I think and I think that can happen in almost in any area. I think that the other thing as well, and I think it's a useful one, not just for luxury brands, but literally a business brand, an enterprise brand, is the customer experience, physical and digital, is the nub of that. Now, there's some of the brands we operate in don't have as much heritage, but the truth is the story and the narrative needs to be brought to life. And actually, it's not about the storytelling, it's actually about the story living. So what does this mean to your consumer or to your customer or your clients, whatever that may be? How can you bring that to life? Because that's what people are really buying. People are really buying. They want the experience. They're not buying, in your case here, a liquid in a bottle. There's 200 years worth of history behind that. There's families, there's generational knowledge that's been passed on. So how do you bring that to life? I think the other thing that really stood out for me more than anything else, I think, was about realizing that being grounded in humility is fundamental. And being aware of what you don't know is as important as what you do know. And I love the acceptance you said, actually, as a general manager and CEO, the first thing I'm going to do is admit what I don't know, but I'm going to go and find it out. And
Yeah.
you'll be forgiven for one, but you won't be forgiven for not caring for people. And we're all, the truth is, if we ground this down, we're all in the people business.
Yes.
Um, but I think if I could just bring this into the sort of final party, I love what you said as well, that if somebody's considered and they reach out to you, I think this is one of the most powerful questions anybody can ask at whatever stage of their career is. I'll just give you a quick. I met somebody recently. He was only 21. He was on an internship, and there were four of us stood there. And he said, "I'm going to do something. I hope you don't mind, but if can I have literally 2 minutes, the best advice possible from each of the four of you?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh my word! I don't know where that guy's going, but if he's doing that, he is just." And he did it really nicely. He was a really good guy. You know, he wasn't just extracting. But I think it's one thing I would say to the audience is please do reach out to people, but do it in a considered, appropriate, polite way. Take a small amount of it, but ask them a question or two. And look, you know, even someone like yourself is willing to share that. But I think this all comes down to, you mentioned luck at the start of this. Yeah. And I do think, you know, to quote Gary Player here, I think you're absolutely right, which is the more I practice, the luckier I become.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
So can I leave the final word with you, or the final thoughts with you?
Yeah, look, I think the world we work in is a very small place. We need to work together, and I think we all need to be inquisitive. We all need to try and help each other. And brands are built through people as well. And I think you mentioned a minute ago. To me, story living is what it's all about, and that's what it is about: building experiences and creating moments and occasions where people come together and enjoy products together. And that's the success, I think, for brands in the future. So look forward to the future. Thank you, Adrian.
Well, I just want to thank you hugely for your time, your effort, your wisdom today. And I know the audience is actually going to really appreciate it. So thank you, Ian.
Thank you.